So without further ado, I'm going to hand things off to the Reverend Canon Steven Balke, who described himself to me recently as a sort of accidental emergency preparedness priest. I'll let him say more about that, but Stephen, thanks for getting us started on a practical note today.
Yes.
And we'll adjust times as need be. I'll sit over here and we can kind of figure out how we need to
when I need to be yanked off the crozier.
All right. So thank you for being here, Stephen, and good to see everybody.
Well, as Kyle said, I'm Stephen Balke. I'm the canon vicar here at St. James Cathedral. I had the great fortune of being in a small working group with a couple of people, Katie Mears from Episcopal Relief and Development, Eric Moen with the Episcopal Health Foundation, and the Emergency Response Task Force for the Diocese of Texas. Right around the same time that the Diocese of Texas had been named by Episcopal Relief Development as a high risk zone due to several recent forest fires and flooding incidents, and let's be real, there had also been a kind of a rash of church shootings, not at any Episcopal church in the diocese at the time, but it was happening, and it was a conversation people were starting to have about how are we preparing our clergy to know how to prepare ahead of time for a crisis, and then when a crisis is actually happening, what to be doing in the moment. This is not something that I ever expected a ministry tie into, but if any of you have ever found that your ministry has prepared you and called you to serve in ways that's not what you expected, there I am. I was a school teacher before going into the priesthood. Nothing prepared me for being, what did you call me, emergency priest?
Emergency preparedness priest.
Emergency preparedness priest, yeah. Crisis response priest. I've been called disaster priest, which I'm not a fan of that one. I don't know. So it feels like I'm causing the disaster. But it is good to be here with you all. If anybody wants the slides, there's a QR code here. If anybody wants the slides at some point, and I'll put this up later as well, so you can all have copies of them as we go along. I'll bring that back up. But I know we're going to get to the practical very quickly, but starting with the impractical for just a moment, I really do think about emergency preparedness and crisis communication about being tied into a ministry of hospitality, which comes from the Latin, the word hospice, which means care for the other. I think part of how we show hospitality to our parishioners, to our families, to ourselves, to each other, part of how we show hospitality is by being there for each other in a crisis. And I think it's tied into stewardship, which comes from the Old English, being the hall keeper. So if you ever have if any of your wardens ever say that they aren't supposed to be in charge of the stewardship campaign, remind them that the ward part of stewardship means the wardens are supposed to be doing it for you. There you go. The keeper of the hall. So a couple of things we're going to try to zoom through today. Theology of hospitality and stewardship by planning ahead. Check. Got that done. Part of the emphasis of this is you don't want to do like I have done, and we'll get into that in a little bit, about waiting until the thing has happened and then realizing you weren't prepared for it. As much as you can, you're going to be better off if you just start thinking about what you should do ahead of time. You'll all be better off for it. And realizing there are tons of resources available. You don't need to reinvent the wheel. A quick Google search, I will provide some things, but a quick Google search will bring up tons of planning resources at your disposal. So don't feel like I'm overwhelmed, I don't know where to begin. There's plenty of resources available. And I also can't just give you easy answers about saying, I wish I could give you a document saying, here's what you should do, but it's all going to be very contextually specific. I am currently serving at the Cathedral. It's very different in its circumstances than when I was at St. Stephen's in Beaumont, Texas, which is a neighborhood, like a parish, a pastoral-sized neighborhood parish. Very different circumstances. The preparedness guide is going to look completely different. And so one thing I hope you walk away with this is plan ahead, be ready before the things happen. There are resources available, but a lot of it you're going to need to tailor to your local needs. When I was looking at the emergency preparedness guide at St. David's in Austin, they have a whole thing in there on proper gun use and everything in the Diocese of Texas. Different circumstance than we're dealing with here, right? I'm not spending as much time talking about proper gun use in this. Develop a planning process not in isolation, but with your staff, with your vestries. I'm sure you could all come up with a proper emergency plan all by yourselves. You're smart people. Include them in the process, not even, you might need their help, but also you want them on board. And including them in the planning process, even if you could do it all alone, is going to help get their buy-in rather than just handing them an emergency document and saying, here it is, whether you like it or not without your input. We can learn from each other. Right? We're not going to have tons and tons of time to spend all day learning from each other's stories in this, but you're going to be colleagues for however long we're here together, and so look around the room. We're resources to each other. I hope you, at the end of this, know you can reach out to me anytime, and let's brainstorm together. Let's be resources to each other. And as I said at the very beginning, hopefully, learning from people who have done it the wrong way and had things happen to them so that you don't need to make the same mistakes that I made. I started by titling this, how to not learn things the hard way, / how to not close the barn door after the horse has gotten out. But August 2017, I was the rector at St. Stephen's Episcopal Church in Beaumont, Texas. August 2017 was right as Hurricane Harvey was hitting. Flooded hundreds of churches, dozens and dozens of Episcopal churches in the area. Beaumont's kind of along the Gulf Coast up toward the Louisiana border, which meant we could see it coming for days. One of the scary things about a hurricane is you can watch it coming and there's nothing you can do about it. Right? It's not quite like a tornado. I would be okay with not doing another hurricane again anytime soon, but we were watching as it was hitting church after church after church up along the borders, knowing it was about 2 days out from flooding us. We would eventually realize we would have 10 feet of water in some places in town. I mean, places where people had water up to their roof lines. This is Main Street, Main Street, people going around in boats. You can see the cars all flooded. So we knew it was coming about 2 days out. I had heard that there was an emergency planning manual, and I thought, great, I'm going to break that out. We're going to get ready. We're going to know what to do. The diocese provided this for us. It was a wonderful resource, an emergency planning manual. And I opened it up, and the whole thing was blank. Because we had never filled it out. Emergency contacts, phone trees, what to do, who to reach out to for this emergency or that, backup plans. It was all blanks to fill out in there, but we didn't do it. And now the hurricane was coming in 2 days and there wasn't time. So, one takeaway, don't wait until the hurricane's 2 days away to then pull this out of your desk drawer and realize you didn't fill it out. We learned a lot of valuable lessons in this. We didn't have power, we didn't have the ability to meet in church. I realized that the hurricane was coming in on a Sunday morning and I didn't have a way to reach out to my parish and let them know, don't come to church. So again, there wasn't time to set it up in advance, but I learned from that for the next time. Make sure you've got a way that you could immediately send a message out, broadcast to the whole community. Don't come to church. We're underwater, right? Or the building's on fire, or heck, it's just cold outside and we're canceling church today. Whatever it is, we didn't have a way to reach out to everybody. So think about what that way would be before you need to do it. I just started furiously calling as many phone numbers as I could and asking people, please start calling your friends and letting them know.
Do you have a recommendation for a tactic? Like, what would you use? Because some people are on Facebook, some people do email, some people do cell phones.
There are definitely strategies out there for sure. And among some of us, if you're using like ACS or Realm or Breeze church database systems, a lot of those even already have a setup so that you can send an emergency message that goes out to every email and every phone number that you have. You just need to set it up to do that. Some of them, I think, charge per text message that goes out, but I think in an emergency, it might be worth it for the 10 cents a text message that it is to let everybody know, don't come in. And then I've got a couple of others that we'll get into. So we had to learn a lot of the hard way that we really were not prepared to communicate with each other and let our parishioners know what was going on. Had a hard time communicating with my vestry. where I was trying to send emails, and some people are hitting reply all, some people are hitting reply, some people are writing based on an old email that came out yesterday and they didn't have the current information. It was a way to realize really quickly that email was not a great way to communicate in a crisis. But we learned a lot, and we were not going to make the same mistakes again. I tell you what, after Hurricane Harvey happened, I immediately got the emergency manual out and I filled out all of those blanks. So we had all the information filled out and ready to go. Put it in my desk so that it was ready for the next time we ran into a crisis, which was in May of 2018. Which is May of 2018. May 2018, we actually had a bomb planted at our church that went off in the middle of the night. Nobody was hurt. It went off at 3 in the morning when nobody was there. They caught the guy right away afterwards. It was kind of if you all remember the Austin bombing, and remember when that was a thing, the Austin bomber that was putting all those packages in the mail, and it was on national news. They think he was kind of a copycat of that kind of deal. But called the police. They immediately called the Beaumont area FBI office, who immediately called the Houston FBI office, who immediately called the Washington, D.C. FBI office, and within probably a couple of hours, there were FBI agents everywhere. The buildings were shut down. They were looking for secondary devices. We had a school. They had to evacuate the school. And it was all shut down, and I thought, aha, the emergency manual, which was in a building I couldn't go into.
Yeah.
Because I had taken the time to fill it all out and put it in a drawer that then I had no access to in the emergency. All the contact information, our phone tree, everything we worked so hard to set up, we couldn't use. So I clearly hadn't learned all the lessons. One of the things I learned from this one is make sure you've got your emergency manual stored in the cloud somewhere so that you can bring it up at home on your computer. Make sure there's a backup copy somewhere. So a lot of this is just being around people and learning from what we've had to work on together. We'll learn from each other and each other's stories, but the emergency preparedness part first. As I mentioned, you're going to have to think about things in your local context. It's always going to be better to plan ahead rather than be in the moment trying to figure out how to make the plan. Once you've got the leadership as a part of that plan, you're going to want to do a regular refresher in that. I made sure that from that point forward, when we had an emergency plan, every year as part of the vestry orientation, as old vestry members are coming off and new vestry members are coming on, one of our vestry meetings we spent going over the emergency plan so that they weren't hearing about it for the first time because they had just gotten elected and we never did it. We made sure that it was part of the ministry. If you were the altar guild head or the usher head or the verger or the head of the Sunday school, part of that job is being familiar with what the emergency preparedness plan is. Right? It's not just an extra thing, but it was an expectation of the job. You're going to help us know what to do in an emergency, and we're going to do this every year. And again, some of those resources that are available. I've got a shared folder here. Anybody can access this. It's a public folder that's shared that already has, I think, 3 different emergency preparedness guides. Whoop, I'll put that back up. 3 different emergency preparedness guides showing different ways of doing it, different manuals you can have up. I've included this presentation in here as well.
I'll make sure to email it out to you all, so don't feel like you've got.
You don't have to do it right now. Yeah, this is all going to be available.
I'll get it from Steven and mail it out.
So, thinking through it out loud, we're all going to have different answers to the question, but taking the time to think through. I'm leading church on a Sunday morning. I'm at the altar presiding, and a parishioner starts having a heart attack out in the pews somewhere. What's the plan? The plan can be I stop the worship service, we immediately tend to their needs, I run out of the building, I call 911. That can be the plan. The plan could be I make a note of it. I've got the microphone, so I let the ushers know. So the ushers will handle calling 911 and waiting for the ambulance to arrive. There's going to be different ways to handle it. It's going to depend on your resources too. We had at St. Stephen's, I instituted a vestry person of the day, right? So we had 12 different people on the vestry. They were on a rota so that every Sunday at every worship service, there was an assigned vestry person that was always present. They were there to welcome people, be your local vestry person, so that if you ever said, I need to bring something up to leadership, you could say, there he is, there she is. But part of what the vestry person of the day also did is they knew, we had already planned ahead of time, that they're the point person to go meet the ambulance outside. And so we were immediately going to have the sexton. Our sexton is a great guy. He's going to call 911. Sexton would call 911. The vestry person of the day knew it was their job to be the one to meet emergency responders outside and show them where the problem is. My job, as being the priest up there with the microphone, was to let people know in the midst of a crisis, is the building on fire? We need to calmly evacuate. We're suspending the service and calmly evacuate, or no, we went a little crazy with the incense. Everything's fine. But I'm the person that can then, I have the benefit of being the one that everybody is listening to anyway, hopefully. But I can get up in the pulpit and I can say, everybody, we've checked, that's just the incense. We're going to continue with the worship service, or it's time to calmly evacuate the building. Right? While the vestry person is the one that's meeting the fire truck outside. Because they're not going to know if the fire is in your parish hall or the education building. They're not going to know where that is. Formation hour. You've got people all over the building. You've got kids in the basement or across the street. You've got adults up here doing their adult formation or their Bible study. You've got the altar guild over in the church setting up for the worship service, and the fire alarms start going off, and people are scattered all over the building. What's the plan? There's not necessarily one right way to do it, but it's something you and your vestry should think through. What will be our plan in that moment? Most of us, I don't think, are lucky enough to have a PA system. We don't have one here, that's for sure. We don't have a PA that we can announce across the whole building. So what's the way we can let people know immediately what to do? Great piece of advice. I really didn't want parents running all over the building looking for their children because the smoke alarm has gone off. And then we've got parents with kids all over the building. We've probably evacuated the children already, and they're running around downstairs looking for their children, right? So we made it really clear. Part of our procedures were people knew, in the case of an evacuation, the Sunday school teachers will escort the children out. Parents do not go looking for them. You will meet them outside when they've been escorted outside by the Sunday school teachers, right? To alleviate the problem of having parents all over the building looking for their children. But depending on your needs, maybe context specific, but to think through, what will we do in that moment if it comes to pass? There's a crisis that's currently unfolding, and reporters are coming up to you and asking you for a soundbite. What do you do? They're springing it on you in the moment saying, we're putting you on live television right now, what do you do? It's good to just have a sense of what is going to be an appropriate response. Even more importantly than you all, what happens if they start running to the head of the ushers and asking for the head of the ushers to be on the local news? And the head of the ushers doesn't know what's the appropriate thing to say to the reporter. So having a plan ahead of time, we'll get to that in a moment. But this is part of the preparedness. We'll get to that in the crisis communication. What to do if you don't have access to your building? What's your plan if you need to try to be a parish to somebody and your building is unavailable because it's been plowed over by a snowplow, or even just the internet's out and we can't operate from our building because we have no internet access? What do we do? I really liked that we had after the hurricane, we had a couple of partner parishes that we hooked up with so that if any of us were in an emergency, we needed to use somebody else's copier, they knew they could always come over and use our copier. We knew we could always go over and use their copier. We already had it set up so that if our building was not available for use on a Sunday morning, we would go worship over there instead. And likewise, it was a relationship we had built. We were like sister parishes. We had set up with each other to be satellite locations if we ever needed something and we didn't have access to our own building. And it was a way of supporting another parish as well. We were supporting each other. So, crisis communication. We're talking about crisis communication and emergency
Oh
preparedness.
my God, let me not interrupt that. I just heard the sound of my Canon Vic up. All right, good to see you.
See you in about 30 minutes.
Okay, yeah, so I'm going to stop there for the moment. Here's that shared folder to get to all this. But to pause for just a second, to just think through initial thoughts about the emergency preparedness part.
That's my comment, that the plans are very helpful, but in the moment, people do what people do.
Right.
I know that we've had plans and then the plans didn't work and I felt bad. Like I felt bad later. Like why didn't it work? And it's because humans are humans. It's not because you didn't try. Like why didn't our thing do the thing?
Absolutely.
Just because whatever.
No, that is a really good point. I would say, thank you for bringing that up. You can try to make the most meticulous plan in the world, but you're right, in the moment. So there's a couple of reasons. And so at first I would think, then why bother planning? But there's a couple of reasons for that. I don't think you're saying there's no point in planning. I don't think that's the case. But it's recognizing that part of why you plan and you get used to talking about something over and over again, you hope that it becomes routine enough in your place. This is why kids in school, this is why they do fire drills again and again and again and again. Or when I was in Michigan, tornado drills over and over and over again, because you need to know whether to go to the basement or run out of the building. You don't want to do the wrong one, right? The reason why you practice it over and over and over again is so that in the moment you don't have to think, here's what we do. You can rely on the plan. There is some value in that. The other thing where there's some value in the planning as well, I think, is that it won't go according to plan. But if you and your leadership know what the playbook is, when you've gone off book and when you're not on the plan, you at least all have a shared sense of what you're trying to get to. When it's like on a Sunday morning when you're getting through the liturgy and something goes wrong, but you all have a sense of here's where we're supposed to be and give us a sense of how to try to get back to it together. I hope it's a little bit like that. And that part of the emergency plan is that when things do go wrong or something happens we didn't plan for, you have a starting point, right? And then also to just, not beat yourself up and be hard on yourself for realizing you're not going to be able to plan for every single eventuality. And it doesn't mean you were a bad priest. It doesn't mean you were a bad leader. Yeah.
Well, and they're going to look to us, so it's good for me to at least know what's supposed to be happening, right? Like, since they're all going to look to me anyways, instead of me being like, oh, it's blank, like you had, right? Like,
Right.
And I was thinking too, when I was in Southern California, and I was the children and youth person at it was predominantly refugee community, and it was when folks were going into churches shooting anyone who didn't look like or act the way they wanted them to. And I went to my priest and was like, we need a plan. And he was like, we'll figure it out. We'll figure it out. And I was like, okay, well, I have a plan. I know what I'm going to do with the kids if the shooter comes in.
Right.
And it was like not reassuring. And thankfully he never had to deal with it. But yeah, I was like, well, that's not helpful. Thanks.
Yeah.
So, so it's good to, I think it's reassuring to congregants if they come or a vestry member comes to the priest.
There is something about, even if it's going wrong, to be able to look to the leader and say, we do have a plan. It's not going great, but but we have a plan. That does instill more confidence in leadership than saying, I don't know.
It'll work out.
It'll work out, right? I'm also a mental health first aid trainer, and one of the things that comes up in mental health first aid trainings all the time is we talk about you don't want to be that person that's getting interviewed on the news saying, oh, I just thought it would never happen to me. Right? You'd rather be the person that plans and have it be all for nothing and you were a worrywart and you were planning for nothing. You'd rather be that person than the one on the news saying, I just thought it would never happen to us.
Right. Like, you always seem so nice. You know, I think when you say about the murderers next to it.
Yeah, yeah. Thanks, Stephen. You talked about the vestry training once a year. In terms of like socializing the plan, were there other kinds of like regular cadences that you use? I'm assuming maybe like first day of Sunday school or something, given what you said about Sunday school teachers, but were there other kind of like regular opportunities to kind of hit at that a little?
Yeah, there was in the calendar, it was a calendar of the year. We're liturgical people, like we like calendars, right? There was a calendar time. This is how we did it. You don't have to do it this way, but we said there was a regular day on the calendar year when it was like Sunday school safety training day, not to make everybody afraid. Right? We were always trying to walk that line of not having you be in fear. I thought that was where it was really helpful to come at it from the hospitality and stewardship angle, was to say, this is how we show love to each other, is by being prepared and being ready to help one another should something happen. And it's not about making you afraid of what could happen, but it's a way it is one of the many ways we show love to each other, is by having a Sunday on the calendar where we, honestly, I kid you not, we once a year on a Sunday school, we have let's practice leaving the building. And we practice leaving the building. Part of the usher training, every year at the rally day, you'll do like a rally day or a back to school day. Right around there on the calendar, I always met with the altar guild, the ushers. They probably got tired of hearing it from me, but part of the usher training wasn't just the usher training, it was also making sure the ushers knew, here's what you do if somebody collapses in a pew. Right? You're waiting for my sign or you're not waiting for my sign. You don't want the situation of everyone's waiting for somebody else to take charge, or they're waiting for you and you don't realize they're waiting for you. We would talk through that ahead of time. This is part of being an usher. This is part of being a greeter. Part of being on the sexton staff is knowing where are the AEDs. This is your responsibility as the sexton, is to know where the AED is. It's not an extra thing, it's part of the job. So we did adopt a rhythm to it. Again, Jonathan, kind of to like what you were saying, partly it's having a regular rhythm to it, almost making it liturgical in that sense, makes it rote. In an ideal world, just like we can all rattle off the Nicene Creed without having to like rethink through it, I would love our people to be able to know, in the case of an emergency, here's how we keep each other safe, just by rote, right? That may be a high bar, but that's part of what I'm trying to get us to do. As I said, there's lots of emergency response manuals. I'm going to drop out of here for one sec just to show you. So here's just one example where it seriously has blanks that you and your vestry or your parish admin or whoever is your person that you want to work through, where you fill out all of the things like, what's the contact information for our insurance company? It doesn't do anybody good if I'm the only one that knows and I have a heart attack and I die in my office, right? And no one knows who the insurance company is. That doesn't help anybody else. How to reach your diocese. Your junior and senior warden's contact information. Obviously, you would need to update this every year. You should look through this and make sure it's current. But this has all sorts of, so much more than we're going to be able to get into. Things like how to set up a phone tree, what your phone tree should look like. Things I never would have thought of, such as our procedures on a Sunday morning are going to be different than our procedures Monday through Friday. Right? It's going to be different circumstances. So who do we call on a Sunday morning versus who do we call during the week? There's an evacuation thing. This one it has an evacuation thing. In case you're removing things from the building, here's priorities. Everyone, take the chasubles first, right? What's the priorities so that we all know? Like, grab the hard drive that has all the church files in it and take that with you. Leave the vestments. We can buy more vestments. You can't replace that information. It may be different for each of us, but it's who does what? Who's the person who's supposed to meet the police at the door? Who's the person who's supposed to call 911? Who's the person that's supposed to come down to the Sunday school and talk to the Sunday school, let them know what's going on. So this is just one of, I think I included 3 different guides. It's just 3 different ways of thinking through how to organize the information. You may look at one of them and say, this doesn't make any sense for us, but the other one, this is exactly what we want. The Diocese of, these are from Province 4 has an emergency preparedness manual they put out. The Diocese of Michigan has a good one they just came out with. The Diocese of Texas one that we had not filled out at the time, but it was filled out later. Are all very good resources.
Stephen, can I tell one funny anecdote about that? Like some
Yes,
of these
yes,
response, like what you need to give to your insurance company, like church insurance, is hilarious because they have different prices for stuff. So like, like all the sheet music we have.
Right.
That's heavily insured. And we have so much of it. And so where Roy and I were from, we had all these hurricanes all the time.
Yeah.
And so we literally went in with just a phone and recorded all of it and then made multiple copies of that because it was going to get wet.
Yeah.
But it was probably worth, I don't know, $20K
Yeah.
to replace it. And that's what the church is going to give us back. But if I couldn't prove that I had it, I get $0. So it's stuff that I would have never thought, oh, save the church music. That would have never occurred to me.
Oh yeah, no, thank you. That's a great thing. And this is also why that would never have occurred to me. Make sure you've looked after all the expensive church music. Now I bet my music director, I bet he knows about Save the Church music. You're going to see him with the dolly and the file cabinets in the middle of a fire.
Or just record it.
But
it's one or the other.
record it, right? Because it's insured.
Right.
But you've got to prove it. And so, this is a great example of having a group that you're able to talk through what do we need to think about together with your people in your local context, because there's going to be folks thinking of things that I'm not thinking of, that you're not thinking of. So having a regular group meeting about this would be helpful. So yeah, thank you. I didn't think about the church music.
I thought it was worthless. Honestly.
Right, we'll just print some more. Like, no.
I mean, it was like stuff we would have. I wouldn't think like, oh, it's worth like $20,000.
Yeah.
If I organize, his music is always on the floor.
Right.
Right. I mean, it's just stuff we use. I wouldn't.
Yeah. No,
I
that's
never
great.
thought of that.
That's a good point. So, in case I have not made this clear enough ahead, have a planning guide. Actually fill it out. Store it in the cloud. Plan not by yourself, but with the other folks, with the stakeholders, your vestry, your staff, your ushers, your ministry leaders, anybody who is in a position of leadership in your parish, that this is part of the ministry. And do a regular refresher training on this. This is St. Stephen's campus. This is St. Stephen's campus. We had, I think it was 11 buildings. In the 11 buildings we had on the campus, we realized if we call 911 on a Sunday morning or any given day, and the police truck pulls up here, or the fire truck pulls up here, right? But it's great if this is where they're supposed to be. They're just going to come to the address you give them. Are they supposed to be over here? Are they supposed to be over here? We realized quickly they would have no idea where the emergency is happening. So we called the police department and we said, when we call 911, where will you come? So that the vestry person of the day knew they're going to come here and they're going to need you to tell them that the fire is over here, or that the person that's having the heart attack is over here. And you are going to be where they know where they're coming to. You need to know where they're coming to as well. That makes sense.
In a large parish with lots of doors or exits, we found, especially with the school, numbering the doors, because then we could tell them,
Yeah.
it's a big campus, come to door 4, and they know to look for, and just little plastic, whatever signs, but it was a huge help.
Yeah. No, that's really good.
It's a great idea.
Just thinking through this. Yeah. Having a clear system. Numbered the doors. That's what they do at the elementary schools. Every door is numbered. Go to door 5. It's about brainstorming, not catastrophizing. And as much as you can get people to understand that this is the idea, is what we're doing is the vestry and I, we're getting together and we're brainstorming, how can we be hospitable to each other? How can we take care of each other, our guests, our visitors? And it's not about catastrophizing, really. Okay, so turning from the planning to the crisis communications, you've done all of that advanced planning, it's ironclad, but then you're in the moment of crisis. what do you actually do in the moment? Hopefully your plan will work really well, but just a couple of things to think through about. Communication is so important. And it's communicating all these different areas. How are you going to communicate with your congregation, your leadership, emergency responders? Remember the news I talked about? Like reporters come in. How do you communicate to the reporters when they're putting the camera in front of you? And your family, don't forget your spouse. At least one of these crises, I know I was so busy, and I called the bishop, and I called 911, and I was running around doing the things, and I forgot to tell my wife. Like, it's just, I was so busy. So don't forget that.
What if we'd like to forget our spouse?
What if we'd like to forget our spouse? That's all on you. Right? Your congregations. Setting up a communications tree or a phone tree, right? A lot of people call them a phone tree. You don't necessarily have to do it on a phone. It is really helpful in the moment. And I wished I had set it up ahead of time. I set it up after the fact so that I knew I was not going to be able to get in touch with the 250 people that needed information from me, right? But I need to be in touch with, and the way we set it up our place is I communicate to the vestry, and every one of the 12 vestry members knew who were they supposed to be communicating to. And so we had a vestry person whose job it was to talk to the altar guild, a vestry person whose job it was to call the Sunday school teachers, a vestry person whose job it was to make sure they called, and specifically thinking of the most vulnerable groups as well. Whose job is it to call the families with little kids? Whose job is it to check on the homebound folks? Whose job is it to reach out to those that have language barriers? Right, so in the midst of the hurricane, for example, we made sure we set it up after the fact. One of our vestry people, their job was to call every one of our homebound parishioners up and check on them. So I'm not trying to contact 250 people, I'm contacting 12, which is still a lot, but each of them are contacting 12 people. And then pretty soon, now we've easily contacted 144 people, right? That's my math, that's about right. I like it in a nice graphical display. This just works better with my mind. Have it as a graphical display that we just fill out. This is in one of those guides that you could put in everybody's phone number or email, text, however you want to get the communications across. Your job is to contact them, their job is to contact them. And we would just go over it. We go over it every year. Okay. If you're going to put out a joint announcement to the parish, one of the things to think through is how to put that joint announcement together, especially if you're in the midst of a crisis. When the bombing happened at St. Stephen's and I'm trying to write a joint letter as it's all happening, how do I make sure that the vestry and I are communicating what that letter is supposed to say? Which segues me to the communicating to leadership. Call the canon of the ordinary. Don't forget to call the canon of the ordinary. I'm just saying, I'm making an executive decision here. I don't even know if this is how Andrea Meissen would want it, but I'm going to say I think it's a best practice. If there's an emergency in your parish, you need to at least call Andrea to make sure the bishop knows about it. Nobody wants a situation where the bishop finds out about a problem by reading it in the news. Right?
Yes, that is correct.
Right? Like, yeah, exactly. It's like, nobody, and worse yet, I bet this is true, nobody wants the bishop to find out there's a crisis because a reporter's asking them for a comment. And they don't know what they're talking about.
Yes, that is correct.
Right? So make sure, first call. Maybe first call might be spouse, second call canon of the ordinary. I'll leave that at your discretion, but those should probably be like the first two calls, right? Set up a way, this is a crucial thing I'm going to leave you all with. Set up a way to be in simultaneous contact, not being in the same room together with your vestry. This was a clutch thing for me. As I was during the hurricane trying to figure out how do I accurately convey information. Later on in the pandemic, this became super helpful to already have this in place. When you're working on a shared statement, have some way you can work on something together without being in the same room. What we used was Slack. This is my plug for Slack. They don't give me any money for this, but I'll say we found this was super helpful for us. Because everybody could get the messages, whether it was on their phone or their computer, whether they were in town or had evacuated. We had one letter we were working on that was a joint letter, and so there weren't some people, because if you're doing it by email, some people have got the old version.
Yep.
Some people have got version 3 and you're working on version 4, and then they're editing version 3 and you've moved on, right? So everybody's always working on the most current version of your document. And if you need to be in an emergency, you can set it up so that even if people's phones are on silent, you can set it so that it can break through even if it's silent for an emergency channel. We created an emergency channel. It wasn't for chatting. We had a chat channel for we wanted to share cat pictures with each other, right? Because we did that, but we had an emergency channel, which was, this is the one that it was only used when it's like the emergency broadcast system. Everybody needs to know what's happening. We set this up at first when we were practicing active shooter drills and realizing people might be hunkered down in rooms somewhere and needed to be able to say who's in the building, hunkered down somewhere, and who is evacuated. That's how I got my vestry sold on it anyway. I mean, I made it a requirement at our vestry to say, part of the job of being on the vestry is you have to have the Slack app. This is a part of the job. If you're not willing to be on the Slack app and have me teach you how to use it, that's one of the qualifications of the job. Nobody gave me any pushback on that because it was the hospitality thing. This is how we'll take care of each other. And just as a side benefit, we ended up just doing all of our vestry work on Slack from that point forward. So we got rid of the emails, which I loved. So we weren't doing any email stuff anymore. We were just doing all vestry communications were happening on Slack.
How much does it cost?
It was free for us at the time. It was free, at least at the time we set it up, it was free for fewer than 50 people, right? So we were using it for free at the time. No guarantees it's still free, but I think it is. And then setting up those partner parishes. Do you have another parish? It doesn't have to be an Episcopal church. You had a Methodist church around town. That even if it's our copier is broken down and we need to print Sunday bulletins, it's great if you're in a partnership with the Methodist church down the street that they know you can use they can use yours in an emergency, you can use theirs in an emergency. Even if it's as simple as that. Emergency responders, I already did the thing about not knowing where to show up, right? But you should also make sure that you know who your utility companies are, who your city services are. This is all in those emergency manuals to have that written in advance so you're not trying to figure out how to reach all of these services. But remember, they don't understand the polity of our church. They don't know our ecclesiality, right? They're not going to know the difference between a rector and a sexton and an usher and unless you get an Episcopal police officer that you're lucky enough to be talking to. So just be aware, they don't know who speaks for the church. And they don't probably know your campus. I like the numbered doors out here. Case in point. The news media, this is the bombing. This is when I started, the news articles all started popping up, all the stories. During the hurricane, we had Anderson Cooper flying overhead in a helicopter, like pointing out what was going on in the moment. Nothing in seminary prepared me for how do you talk to a reporter in the middle of a crisis.
That's right.
Anybody take crisis communications in seminary? I didn't know how to talk to a reporter. So this is the advice that was given to me. I'm giving it all to you as well. This was advice from my bishop at the time, who said, become friends with the phrase, we have no comment at this time, during an ongoing investigation. It is a very easy way to respond. We just don't have a comment at this time. It's because if we're making comments about things in the middle of an unfolding problem, we may mislead people. We could actually be hindering an investigation. I had to have a talking with somebody who had our access to our Facebook channel when the guy who planted the bomb at St. Stephen's, the alleged person who had the bomb, was arrested. They immediately blasted out on Facebook, they've got the guy, he's caught. And I was like, no, we don't know that. Had them take the Facebook post down because we don't want to do anything that's going to interfere with this investigation in case they've grabbed the wrong guy. The reason for doing it, to get your 15 minutes of fame because you get to be on the news, it's not worth it. It's not worth it if you might be doing something that's going to mislead people or hinder the investigation. So the advice that was given to me is We have no comment at this time during our investigation. I prefer written statements rather than verbal statements because it gives you the ability to think through your messaging, and then you've got consistent messaging that you're giving. Every reporter is getting the same story. Here is our message. When they come to you and want a verbal interview and you say, I will give you a written response, they'll have to accept it. It's going to be okay. It gives you the ability to make sure it's okay with the bishop, whatever you've written. Reduces the chance of being misconstrued, and it doesn't leave you on the spot on live TV or in a YouTube viral moment or a TikTok viral moment. It helps it helps make sure that you and your staff are all giving the same messaging. What you don't want to have happen is you don't want to be saying one thing and your senior warden is saying something else, right? So again, that's that Slack thing, right? It makes sure we have a unified message that we're all saying the same thing. And like I said, tell the bishop before she sees it on the news. This is not about concealing information. It's not about trying to hide things. It's really about not causing the additional harm that can be caused. Last but not least, family. Don't do like me. Don't be in such a hurry that you forget to call your spouse, right? That this is a crisis for them too. Remember that this is a crisis for them too. If you're the person at the church dealing with the church that's actively on fire, they are also in a crisis because they're worried about you, right? Give them a call, right? It's important for your care also. So that's it. That's the whole thing. I know it probably creates more questions than answers, but the whole idea is to get the conversation going. It's thinking through all these things. Remembering most importantly, there's the QR code again. Remembering most importantly, you're not alone in this, right? Planning ahead is absolutely the better way to go because you don't want to be thinking about how to respond in the moment. You want to have thought about it ahead of time. And just remember, there's tons of resources out there that are available. This is just a few of them. And you're not alone in this. As far as I'm concerned, we're all in this together. So if building's on fire and you want to know what to do, give me a call. I might not have the answer, but somebody here has the answer about what to do. So we'll work on it together.
Couple things. First of all, Stephen, thank you so much.
Yeah.
Stephen has agreed to be here for lunch, so if you'd like to find Stephen lunch and have some more conversation, that's a possibility. I know that the intensity of the worry about ICE has gone down, and I know that that's like a whole nother conversation. But Stephen, the one thing I wondered if you might share is, I know you have been involved with some others in creating some resources around that, and I was under the impression that not everyone knew about some of that, and there were some good reasons why some of that wasn't being shared in public places or what have you. So if somebody wants to get a hold of that resource, what do they do? It's here? It's in here. Good. It's in here as well. Yes, I also threw in there the ICE response packet that we put together, which is ICE agents show up your door on a Sunday morning and they say they want to start looking around in the place. What is your response, right? And we created signage in the building to put up. We created a quick worksheet to hand to ushers or greeters to know how an usher could respond or how a greeter could respond. A lot of it is quick Fourth Amendment right training, which is like our understanding of here's what our rights are as a church. And again, it's not this is what you should do. It's a planning document to help you think through what should we do in our local context. But that's in there as well. Brian, was it?
Yeah, I was just wondering, there's a couple of resources from other dioceses. Do you know if our diocese is working on having a general guide?
I do not know. Okay. It is something that I'm sure we could talk about, working on a guide from but again, in a not recreating the wheel situation, I think if I were giving advice at the moment, what I would say is let's probably look at the other guides that have already been put out and figure out what would look good in our local context. And mostly what we're doing is just changing the seal on the front of the guide, but the basics of the content are probably the same.
Right. I was thinking mostly in terms of who at the diocese would like to be contacted in what way, I think is probably the only thing that would be specific.
I do, so I will say, at least in this, as far as the only thing I've checked in advance, because I don't want to mislead anybody about this, is I do know that what we talked about was that in the case of an ICE situation, somebody in one of our parishes gets detained or pulled out of the church on a Sunday morning. We did say, please make sure you contact Crystal Plummer right away. Crystal Plummer is actively engaged on our Sanctuary Committee and the Peace and Justice, the Joint Task Force, and she will make sure that information gets conveyed to the rest of the diocese and to the bishop as well.
And I think Crystal will be with us, so if there's any questions. All right, Stephen, thank you again.
Yeah, thank you, everyone.
We're going to take a quick